Good morning. It is Friday, August the 5th, 2022. Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Lots of news this morning. Breonna Taylor, Brittney Griner. Also this morning, the Biden administration on Thursday had declared monkeypox a public health emergency with cases on the rise across the United States. The announcement came during a briefing with the Department of Health and Human Services. The administration has been criticized at times for its handling of the outbreak, and some have called on the government to declare a national emergency without delay. Since the first U.S. monkeypox case was identified mid-May, more than 6,600 probable or confirmed cases have been detected in the country. Cases have been identified in every state except Montana and Wyoming. The declaration follows the World Health Organization announcement last month that monkeypox is a public health emergency of international concern. The WHO defines a public health emergency of international concern as an extraordinary event that constitutes a public health risk to other states throughout the international community. And so we're going to keep our eye on that. New York, San Francisco, California, Illinois, they all have declared their own separate emergencies. This morning is a life of torture and cruel punishment awaiting WNBA superstar Brittney Griner after a Russian judge sentenced her to 9 years in prison yesterday. Well, we're going to discuss the prison she's headed to, why she's going there, and what typically goes on there, and why it's imperative for she and her loved ones that the Biden administration act swiftly to bring her home. Also, 4 Louisville officers have been charged with federal crimes in the 2020 death of Breonna Taylor, but many questions still are unanswered, including from those who ask what took so long and why the charges don't include either manslaughter or murder. We discussed all that this morning. We got a huge panel, but we're going to start off with the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., NMPA journalist Dawn Montgomery, and Robin Massengill is also joining us this morning. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Doc, we usually do ladies first, but I know that you are traveling. So, Doc, we're talking the Brittney Griner situation. She is really, what's going on here is she's headed to a penal colony, Doc, and it is imperative. Her loved ones and others are saying, I saw Chuck D this morning post a drawing that he did of her saying that this is why he travels as a citizen of more than just the United States. This is serious, Dr. Chavis.
It's very serious. She's a political prisoner, and diplomatic as well as behind the scenes efforts have to be made now to expedite bringing her home. It is not surprising what the judge in Russia did. That increases Russia's leverage. And so the United States and Russia are going to have to negotiate to bring all these and bring Brittney and the other Americans home from Russia. I'm still optimistic that something will be worked out, but it has to be done behind the scenes. I don't think public negotiation is going to lead to her freedom.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because Robin, we've seen that when the U.S. Finally publicly acknowledged the offer of Victor Bout, Russia upped the ante. Now they want someone else. How do they handle that from here, Robin?
I think that I think Dr. Chavis is correct that the negotiations have to occur behind the scenes. Russia has leveraged Brittney Griner. And it's like she was in the wrong place at the wrong time and at the start of a war between Russia and Ukraine. And so I think that negotiations are going to be behind the scene. They call it diplomatic silence is what they call it. And that they will do all that they can to bring her home. But I think that Dr. Chavis is right. It's going to be a long road for her.
Yeah. And Dawn, I know you had some really serious thoughts on this. she's headed to this penal colony where it's known that they torture specifically Americans in this prison, but others, prisoners there is certainly not like prisons in the United States from what they've described.
And yet she's been over there for about 168 days, and now she's going into an environment that she's not going to be familiar with, and we still need to continue to have her in our prayers. I know that a lot of the reactions I've seen on social yesterday, I've had a couple of people reach out because they've seen us talk about this on Let It Be Known News, and they have all had various thoughts on the sentencing. But again, as what Robin as well as Dr. Ben Chavis has stated, this is a part of the process. So at this point, this is when really the clock starts beginning to tick, because we really need to understand that the negotiations are happening behind the scenes, as Dr. Chavis has explained to us in depth before. And I just feel like at this point, it's just really keeping her lifted up in prayer, as well as just thinking about the various ways we can keep the news talking about these things. I know the NBAPA or what have you has put out something, a notification just stating how they feel about everything. And I know that some of her teammates were upset to having to play yesterday, knowing that she had been sentenced. And this is just, it's real life for a lot of people that are involved, that really love her and care about her at this time. And as a sports fan, it's very disturbing that now she's going to be placed in this environment, and there's absolutely nothing that we can do until the negotiations go through and the deal is done.
Yeah, and Rashonda, thanks for joining us. Rashonda Tate Billingsley from the Defender Network. Rashonda, here's how it's described. It says about these penal colonies that they're actually called corrective labor colonies. They're the most common type in Russia. And what happens there is that they usually put them in cells with at least 6 other women. And what happens is authorities can act with impunity. They're free to torture their prisoners in the hope of extracting a false confession. In these colonies, prisoners are assigned to work brigades and given daily tasks to complete. They work up to 17 hours a day in hard labor. And in many ways, there's been reported that even more cruelty was the catch-22 built into the forced labor. It says you have to fill your work quotas, and the quotas themselves will be increased. Yet if you fail to meet them, you'll be punished. I think you're on mute.
You think I've been doing this long enough, I would know. Sorry about that. This just breaks my heart, because not only is Brittney being used as a political pawn, but Brittney is a Black woman and she's gay. So that is just going to give these Russian prison guards just even more reason to make her life miserable and to make her life hard. I really do hope that they are doing the quiet negotiations, but Russia knows they have the upper hand now. And they're going to use everything at their disposal, including torturing her in all aspects, to try and hammer home and get whatever it is that they're trying to get out of this whole deal.
Yeah, one of the so-called privileges that was taken away from one prisoner there, as Lauren Burke joins us, is that prisoners, when they want to punish some of the prisoners, one of the privileges they take away is not allowing them to use the bathroom. So this is really serious, Lauren. So we talked about the negotiations, Lauren. Again, thanks for joining us. This has to be acted on swiftly, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Obviously, it's a massive political problem for the president, and it could become a bigger political problem for the president as he heads into the midterms. I think there's 95 days to election day. It's really more, I guess, the symbolic nature, obviously, of an American being kidnapped by the Russians. It's clearly not the look that the administration wants, but I think they've just been too quiet throughout this process with this. They just, at the very least, I mean, we know that they can't just snap their fingers and have her come home and then that's it. Everybody understands that, but at the same time, they can do things like use the bully pulpit to its fullest extent and talk about it as loudly and as aggressively as they can, and they haven't really done that. And who knows why that isn't the case? I can't figure out. You have a constituency. You have a few constituencies here. One, she's an American. 2, she's a Black female. 3, she's a member of the LGBT community. You have all those check marks for the Democratic Party. So if you were just doing cold hard politics, you would think that President Biden would be a little louder than he's been so far.
Well, and also I think, I want to throw this out there because now, I mean, they have Brittney Griner, who's the biggest name there, but there are other names, right? Paul Whelan, as we discussed, and also U.S. citizen and teacher Mark Fogel, who's 60 years old. Last year, he was sentenced 14 years of hard time for one marijuana cigarette found in his luggage at the airport, similar to Brittney. Brittney was this oil, less than a gram of oil. And then there's Sarah Kravanik, who is an American teacher. She was visiting her boyfriend. Her boyfriend is Russian, lives in Russia. She had got assaulted at a bar, went home, and he started assaulting her. She picked up a knife to defend herself. She didn't use the knife. He called the police, and now she's serving years in hard labor for attacking a Russian citizen. So those are just some of the Americans. So Brittney Griner's case obviously is the name, right? So this seems like it has been going on, Robin, for a long time, and now the Griner case is kind of shining some light on this.
I think, I remember my mother warned my sister and I when we were growing up, when we would go overseas, she would say, Robin, please don't do anything. Please, just don't touch, don't do anything. And I understand, I understand why she said that. You have really no rights once you're arrested overseas. And Russia is a much harder country than most. But, the unfortunate thing is that Brittney is there, like many other women athletes, because of the pay disparity in America. WNBA players make $100,000 a year, which is pittance compared to the men. So the fact that she was there because of the discrimination that we have in the United States is really why she was there. But the bottom line is there really is nothing that America can do once you are in the custody of the government of a foreign country. And it's not new. I mean, we've had many more. This has happened a lot. It's just that it's Brittney this time, this really vulnerable Black gay woman. But you've had white people in North Korea that was there, took a sign, had no business touching it, and he came back, and died here. So it's been going on a long time, but it's known that once you're in custody overseas, it's very little that America can do. And I hear the uproar, but I think that Biden is moving correctly because the more Putin gets attention, which is what he's wanted on the American stage, the greater advantage he has. And so I think that the silent diplomacy is all we have left at this point.
Well, and to your point, someone's saying that if the U.S. go ahead and make this trade with Victor Bout and this other convicted killer that Russia apparently wants back, the U.S. will be signaling to Russia that it is willing to make major concessions in future negotiations. Is that a real concern here, Rashonda?
Yes, absolutely. I know we're talking about wanting Biden to be more vocal, but I think that's part of why the Russians feel like they have the upper hand, because they know he's in a conundrum. He has a Black America looking at him, which is why they're like, okay, we got Brittney, we have leverage here. And so I think the more that they let it be known what they are doing, the more they feel like they have the leverage to continue to demand more.
Yeah, they certainly have the Biden administration certainly has its work cut out for them. But Lauren, here's the thing, and I ask you this because you're plugged in Capitol Hill. You know all of the ins and outs of what goes on with these things. This country has, and I am certainly not a let's go get them type person, let's go to war with them type person, but we have invaded countries for far less than what Russia does. This is not just about Brittney Griner. What I'm saying, they have persecuted people, they have tortured people forever. Human rights violations is what I'm saying. Vladimir Putin is attached to the Orthodox Church there, so anyone who if you go over there as a Jewish person, if you go over there as a Catholic, a certain type of Catholic, a Jehovah's Witness, he will lock you up. The inhumanity of what he has done has drawn really not much attention, it seems, from America. I mean, do you hear anything about that on Capitol Hill?
What, invading
Well, not
Russia or
necessarily
attacking?
invading Russia, but being outraged, as they have shown outraged. Yeah, they've invaded other countries for less, but we know that this is a different dynamic because we're talking about another superpower. But has there been any palpable outrage about the human rights treatment? Look, the European Court of Human Rights has already condemned Russia 1,000,000 times, but we haven't really heard a whole lot from America.
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of hot statements yesterday from Nancy Pelosi on down with regard to Russia, and in a general sense, you do hear that. One of our problems is when we lecture other countries about human rights violations, that can get very ironic very quickly on certain issues, particularly around justice reform. Although we know that Russia's system is completely different. Basically, 99% of the litigants just found guilty. So there's really it's oxymoronic to say Russian justice system, but yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really difficult problem. What can you really do? We're not going to declare war on Russia because one person was kidnapped by Russia. So it does come down to bully pulpit. It comes down to economic sanctions. It comes down to things that aren't particularly satisfying to people, because the result is really impossible. Biden can't control. If Trump was in office, he probably wouldn't care. And you saw the statement he made on Griner a few weeks ago or last week. But I mean, it is really not a whole lot an American president can do in this situation. So it is a difficult situation that really is reliant on how good you are at communication strategy, which of course the Democrats are terrible at communication strategy. So that's in the wind. But I do think that they will just make the trade at some point. And so Russia will get their arms dealer and we will get our basketball player at some point. That should happen fairly soon, I would think.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lauren, for that. Bringing in now Attorney Robert Tarver with the Tarver Law Firm. Always a pleasure to have Attorney Tarver. So, Attorney Tarver, I know it's a different country, different set of laws, but the process that Brittney went through, she pleaded guilty to the cannabis, possessing that, but she said it was prescribed to her. What was the problems with her case, other than the fact that she was in Russia?
Well, in terms of the actual case, we know that she's already made the admission. She's not saying that she didn't do those things. She's not saying she didn't have the cannabis oil. She's admitted that she's had the cannabis oil. And that's, of course, 99% of the case there, because once you supply that, you are then completely at the mercy of the court. There were some irregularities in terms of how things were leading up to this. She wasn't given full due process, even under the Russian system, because they didn't have translators that completely allowed her to have the full gist of the documents that she was going to sign and read. There are a number of different things that of course, presented themselves as a difficulty here. But let me just say this. She got 9.5 years. The general time period that people get for these types of offenses after admitting guilt in Russia is about 5 years. So you could see that they tried to accelerate this. And again, there are political reasons for them to do that. They want her value to go up in Russia. And it goes up if she is, for example, at a stage where she's basically hopeless in terms of getting out. 5 years, that would decrease her value a little bit. But the fact that she's now facing so much more time puts a lot more pressure on the Biden administration.
Yeah, Barrington and James, certainly want to hear from you on this before we move on to our next big topic of the day. But Barrington, well, let me start with you first, James, and then we'll let Barrington close out that topic. James, so we know what Brittney Griner now faces. We know the task ahead for the president. I believe it was Lauren who mentioned the importance with the midterms coming up. So that's sort of a deadline for the president, isn't it? He has sort of a deadline to get this done before the midterms, right?
Yes, he does. And people are going to be watching him not only in this country, Stacey, but throughout the world to see how he handles this very volatile situation. Stacey Brown, I have said this before on this show. I've written this on social media. What he needs to do is he needs to get Dr. Condoleezza Rice involved in this case. Dr. Rice, even though she's a Republican, she is an expert on Russia. She has negotiated with Putin before, so she knows the guy, and she knows which buttons to push and which buttons not to push. I'm not taking anything away from Anthony Blinken, but I think in this particular situation, the President Biden needs to name Dr. Rice as a special envoy in order to solve this situation.
Yeah, and Barrington, I want to get your thoughts on what now, what should happen now, what has happened. Real quick, Barrington, throwing it to you.
I don't agree that the midterms is a deadline for him. I don't think that's enough of an issue that people are going to say, well, I'm not going to vote for him because he didn't get Brittney Griner out. She is a political pawn. I expect that, from what I've seen, it makes sense for Biden to go quiet because the Russians have already made it clear that if it's public, they're going to try to come up the works. Hopefully she gets out soon. But I do think that she's going to get out. Yeah.
Well, say her name. And yesterday, Attorney General Merrick Garland did say her name. He said Breonna Taylor should be alive today, as he announced the arrest and indictments and arrest of the 4 current and former Louisville Metro Police officers who have been charged federally in Breonna Taylor's March 2020 death that touched off a firestorm of protests in the city. Attorney Tarver, these charges, many are still saying, well, there's no murder charge attached, there's no manslaughter charge attached, but these are still serious charges, right?
They are serious charges. Look, first of all, murder does not apply. You'd have to have the intent to kill an individual. And there's no facts in this case that said that these officers went there with the intent to kill Breonna Taylor. Reckless, clearly manslaughter could have applied on the state level, but that didn't happen. But the fact of the matter, these charges, these federal charges pretty much mirror those types of charges. They're charged here with falsifying affidavits leading up to the search warrant, which means that there never should have been a search warrant in the first place. Those officers should never have been there because they lied to the court. They're charged with excessive force in using that amount of force against Breonna Taylor, and that mirrors pretty much the manslaughter charge that people would talk about. They're charged with a cover-up here. There's a big cover-up because they got together after this happened, and knowing that they were under federal investigation, and they decided they were going to lie. So they actually put together a letter that was falsified and submitted it to federal authorities. The reason why this is more significant and more serious is that they face up to life imprisonment on these charges.
Wow. And so let's dissect this. Barrington, James, I think Rashonda and Robin is still with us. Let me ask you, Robin, Daniel Cameron, how much of a role did he play in this as far as covering this up? Because he seems to have been the person at the center of this. He refused to charge these officers. He signed off on a lot of this. Robin, I think you're on mute.
I think he's culpable. I don't know what he was thinking, to do what he did. I don't know what any of them were thinking to do what they did, but they're all on the hook. And hopefully he will get his day in court as they have. I don't know what he was thinking, truly.
Yeah, I'd imagine, Barrington, your words for Daniel Cameron is a little stronger than Robin's. I think we kind of lost Barrington there, but Robin, let me go back to you. These officers, as you heard Attorney Tarver, they're facing life. They lied on an affidavit. They lied in the search warrant. So they lied to the court here too, right, among others, right?
Right.
But this is no surprise. The real question, I'm glad Lauren is back with us, is what took so long?
The wheels of justice, especially in these types of cases, move slowly. It takes a while to discern what role people play, and the fact that it's happening at all, and this quickly on it seems to me it's kind of quick in these kind of cases. The wheels turn slowly, but thankfully there were people that came forward and they talked so much, which was so interesting about this one. They talked so much And that there were people there that were like, no, you're not catching me up in this. You know, we're lucky that they were caught at all. We're lucky they were caught at all.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's dead behind a lie, a warrant that should never have been issued, you know.
Yeah. Attorney Tarver, before I go to Lauren, it's usually bail. When there's bail in the case, and depending on the amount, it sort of signals, sometimes we think as laymen, let me put it that way, that the bail signals how strong or how weak a case might be. In this case, they were ordered released on the condition that they have no contact with each other. The officers were. Does the bail signal anything here? The fact that they were just able to walk out after being arrested?
Not really. In the federal system, it's very different than the state system. You know, if you've not been charged before, if you don't have a prior record, and if you could show that you're not a current danger to the community, by and large, in almost all cases, you're going to have some kind of admission to bail of some sort. I want to correct something, though. Just to be clear, Daniel Cameron, as the Attorney General, did take some action. They did actually present this, and this did go before a grand jury. Actually, the officer was tried, and he was acquitted. Now, look, the bottom line to this whole thing is there are prosecutions, and then there are prosecutions. What I mean is there are aggressive prosecutions sometimes, and there are prosecutions where you say, hey, we're throwing this evidence in front of you. You do what you want to do. My suspicion is that this may not have been an aggressive prosecution.
Well, and as Lauren, go ahead, Lauren, because that's where I was going to.
I'm being kind.
You're always kind, Attorney Tarver. Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, Daniel Cameron is a house Negro. Everybody knows that. He's there to basically appease the Republicans as the black guy in the room that makes white people comfortable and happy. So he was not going to ever do anything on this case because, of course, this is a complete lightning rod that reflects a lot of what police typically get away with, which is lying on reports. I mean, that's kind of just accepted into the American culture as part of police work, and it always has been. And this is a rare case where you have the federal government intervening. I would remind everybody that Daniel Cameron is running for governor of Kentucky, okay? And so he's putting out videos about Fancy Farm when all this stuff is happening, because at the end of the day, he has to appease white Republicans, right? So there was no way he was ever going to do an aggressive prosecution. This is an outrageous case. This is not a case even where you have somebody in a room with somebody else who is the wanted subject of the search warrant, and the other person in the room just happens to get shot in a hail of gunfire. This is, you went to the wrong address. She had nothing to do with anything. They knew they were apparently, they knew they were in trouble on that. They had a meeting in a parking garage to get their lie together. I mean, what else did they have to do other than, film this on video and put it out? Right. I mean, it is a brazen case of police misconduct and lying and official paperwork, which is something that typically police always get away with. It's just accepted. Mm-hmm. It's accepted, and it's just accepted that, we can just lie on paperwork and nobody's going to say anything. That happens almost in every case that we have for police misconduct. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you did any of this as a private citizen without a badge on your chest and police power, something would happen. It's akin to me. It's akin to lying under oath. Mm-hmm. But yet for police, they just have this magic shield around them that nobody says anything. So it was interesting to watch Kristen Clark and the Attorney General Merrick Garland go right to that. And that's the heart of this entire discussion, because that's something that nobody ever gets prosecuted on when you're law enforcement.
It's amazing before, as I go to Rashonda, but it's amazing when you said that, Lauren, the great attorney over here, Tarver, was like agreeing. So, Rashonda, so Daniel Cameron as governor, how will the voters in Kentucky, how will that play, particularly given this situation?
Yeah, that makes me want to just move to Kentucky so I can vote again. I just think the power will be at the polls. Voters will have to come out because Daniel Cameron is exactly, like she said, working for white Kentuckians. And so it will take those Black and Hispanic and people of color and those who just see Daniel Cameron for what he is to come out to the polls and send a different message. But, one of the things that we are as African Americans, a lot of times we're emotional about things like these, cases like these. this is a prime example of working behind the scenes, of following the law. And Merrick Garland, people were like, we needed this to happen quicker. Of course, it could always happen quicker, but you got to let them build their case. And I'm happy to see that finally they built this case, and Breonna Taylor will get some semblance of justice, hopefully.
Well, yeah, it remains to be seen. That's coming up. So, Attorney Tarver, so how do you envision this case being laid out in court?
Well, very clearly, you know, most cases where you have evidence of misconduct, you've got a paper trail. In this particular case, they do have a paper trail. They have letters that were written and submitted to the government in support of what was supposed to be their defense. However, what happens there, further evidence suggested that they were lying. So what I see them doing is I see them first and foremost trying to determine whether or not one or more of these officers is going to turn around and perhaps give evidence against some of the other officers. But if not, any of these officers, all of these officers, all face the same charges. And so when you're building a case based upon misconduct, the paper evidence is what's most important. This affidavit that they submitted, the fact that it is uncontroverted that they lied in the affidavit. And when a jury gets a chance to hear that, they will then be able to know the balance is that life would have been preserved had they told the truth. That, in my mind, is the essence of the prosecution. Every prosecution begins with a theme, and that would be the theme that I would present if I were the prosecutor.
Well, joining us now is Make It Plain himself, Mark Thompson. Always good to see Mark. How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. God bless you all this morning.
Mark, as we lay out this Breonna Taylor case, we look at the fact that we're talking about Daniel Cameron and his run for governor, but his culpability in this as well. Mark, when you heard the indictment and the arrest yesterday, what was your reaction? I was
elated. A lot of people have put work into this. In fact, the theme song of my show every day, Make It Plain, is Breonna Taylor gospel song. No justice, no peace, prosecute the police. And so this is a vision we've kept. The image you just showed, saw Attorney Crump and Tamika Mallory and her organization Untold Freedom has been so diligent in this process. And so that was a great and historic day. And credit goes to our dear sister, Kristen Clark, who spoke at the press conference yesterday, former head of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, a great young civil rights attorney. She is now the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Justice Department. And that shows you the difference it makes when people in the movement go into power in this way. If not for her, I doubt this would have happened. So it was really a great day yesterday to get that news.
And Mark, we just saw this summer the officers in the George Floyd case get sentenced. Basically, they were aiding and abetting. They were standing around doing nothing, right? Of course, Keith Ellison orchestrated that really nicely. How much does this case? How much does the Attorney General, Mr. Garland, have to look to the model of Keith Ellison?
Well, I think that's a good model, a good template, because we know in a lot of these cases, in most of them historically, especially prosecuted at the federal side, there's not been a whole lot of creativity in the approach. And the problem with that is that's why a lot of these cases don't make it and we don't win these cases. And the burden and the threshold is already higher than it should be. But I think Keith Ellison did give us a template. Also glad to see that Merrick Garland, good to see Brother Tarver. It's also good to see that Merrick Garland is being pushed to do something, because he doesn't seem like he really wants to do much himself. And it's interesting, more and more we're seeing other attorneys, peers of his, saying Merrick Garland needs to do a little bit more across the board. And so I'd like to think that this Breonna Taylor prosecution is a sign and indication that the Justice Department is going to be doing a bit more. not to mention the fact we know that there are career civil servants in the Justice Department. My sources tell me that Merrick Garland did not know about the Andrew Gillum prosecution. And that's possible. If that was something that was ongoing and the career civil servants were working on that. But be that as it may, he needs to know what he's doing, what the engagement is, and he needs to be working on some cases to get through. So this is a big case, and this is a big development. Lastly, I'll just say, to see that tweet come across yesterday morning that the officers had been arrested and were in custody. That's what we all were looking for on behalf of Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, and Lauren, Mark, of course, brings up some great points about Merrick Garland. Even on this show, we've heard guests say, when talking about other issues, particularly the January 6th issue, that he's not going to do anything. We heard that for a long time in the Breonna Taylor case. Does this signal that perhaps he is working, as Mark explained, quietly behind the scenes?
No, I think it just signals that Kristen Clark is the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. That's really what it signals. Merrick Garland, you've heard me say this before, that he's the wrong person at the wrong time in history. You just get a lot of times in history the wrong character on the stage, and you needed somebody that has a lot more backbone, like a Doug Jones. And I know that it's controversial to say Andrew Cuomo, but Andrew Cuomo is exactly the type of personality that needs to be in that job for the time that we live in. I mean, there's a threat to our democracy coming from a political party, and the head of that threat is likely to run again for president. We got Merrick Garland. They picked Merrick Garland as the attorney general, knowing full well that you were going to go into that headwind. To say nothing about police policy, which of course is difficult because the culture in the United States is of course overwhelmingly pro-police. So anytime you are prosecuting law enforcement, you are going to get a lot of pushback. And as somebody who has a lot of cops in my family, I understand why that pushback exists, because police work is extremely complicated. Police are called to do things that have nothing to do with police work. We want police to be truant officers. We want police to be psychiatrists. We want police to fix our personal relationships. So they are called on to do things that are outside of the realm of what police traditionally should be doing. But in this particular example with Breonna Taylor, this was a massive screw up with a cover up attached to it. And it ends up with somebody who's dead that should not be dead, that has nothing to do with anything, who violated no law whatsoever. And of course, if this was a white person, everybody would be outraged. The idea that, sort of the same thing, to get back to Brittney Griner for 1 second, where is the white LGBT community on Brittney Griner? Kevin Hart makes a joke and they're all up in arms about everything on that. And then you get somebody in your community that's kidnapped in Russia and you say absolutely nothing. So this is another great example of when the person, is Black, everybody, gets quiet. Well, Breonna Taylor's case is an outrageous case. See, a lot of these cases with police misconduct, police brutality, you can kind of understand the use of deadly force if you watch the video. Although lately we haven't been able to understand that because we've seen outrageous videos in the last 6 or 7 months. But every now and then you do get one where you say, okay, I can understand why the cop may have had to use deadly force and the person is deceased. But this is not one of those cases. Brittney Griner is not even close. And then they had a cover up in a parking garage. Are you kidding me? So, we got Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland is not up to the task. And in fact, I think the President of the United States often is not up to the task. So we have two people who don't have enough fire in the belly to face what this country is facing right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Barrington, I have my 7-second delay for you. I will allow you to chime in. Lauren just broke it down, and he sounds like the female you on that one.
But it's true. I have been saying forever that the Democrats are weak and timid. They're feckless. They wait for. It's like they're afraid to take the initiative to do things that seem obvious to us. And when it comes to issues with Black people, they're even more timid than usual. But I think that one of the things we're seeing is that as long as there's public pressure on Garland and Biden, they're going to be forced to act. So we've got to make sure that they don't sleep, because if we can't sleep, they ain't supposed to sleep neither. Yeah. And it's interesting because I am elated that the Justice Department took the steps it did, but I see what they've done with Tamir Rice and with others of us who they've killed. They try to placate us by saying that they're going to have a DOJ investigation, and then after a few months or a year or whatever, they say, well, there's not enough evidence. So I'm hoping that this doesn't turn out this way. And I also say that we should make sure that Daniel Cameron, who is a straight Tom, we're supposed to make his life a living hell, because he knew.
Barrington, explain to our viewers, what do you mean by Tom?
Well,
You're trying to get me in trouble. That's okay.
Better yet, he said straight time. What's the difference between straight time and a crooked time? That's what I need.
Right.
So he might be both, Mark.
Well, Mark, Michelle Madison is giving you a big shout out. She loves your show. She writes in. And also welcome Michael Haney Sr., the host of 60 Minutes in Black America, which can be found on Facebook and YouTube on Sundays at 6 p.m. Good to see you watching us, Michael. James, sum up your thoughts, please. I'm going to go around the table as we head to conclusion of this show. But James, I'll go to you first before we get to our heavy hitters, the legal minds up there.
Yeah, let me just say that I'm glad the Justice Department, under the pressure of Kristen Clark, decided to go forward with this. And Mark is right. This is really her. Merrick Garland is not an activist. He is establishment. He is Democratic establishment. So he's going to toe the Democratic establishment line, and that's what he does. And we should have had, and I agree with Lauren, we should have had Doug Jones if you're going to have a white male in terms of head of the DOJ, but we're not ready for that yet. So, but I think this is a good step in the direction, but we have to stay on it to see that Breonna Taylor gets justice.
Yeah, Robin Massengill, she's still with us. I don't see Robin, so let's go to you, Attorney Tarver. Legally and otherwise, can you sum up this morning's, yesterday's news on Breonna Taylor and, of course, Brittney Griner?
Look, obviously there are ups and downs. The Griner matter is a downside. She's going to face some significant difficulties going forward, but let's not be deluded. The fact of the matter is that she was in another country. She was involved in a crime, and she did make that admission. So that's a big hurdle to overcome. But there is something that's really important here, and that's that the Justice Department did act. Look, the selection of Merrick Garland for such a time as this is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. He's just not the appropriate person. But the fact, never underestimate the ability of individuals to push someone in a certain direction. Never underestimate, for example, what Lyndon Johnson did with the Congress many years ago in pushing people forward for the Civil Rights Act. Never underestimate the ability to push a timid person into another position. So that's what I think happened here, and I'm grateful for it.
Wow, Attorney Robert Tarver summing it up. Robin, can you, in your words, sum up the situation this morning with Brittney Griner and Breonna Taylor? I think we lost Robin again. But so we'll go to make it plain. Mark, go ahead and make it plain.
Well, I would somewhat disagree with James that Merrick Garland is Democratic establishment. I'm not even sure he's Democratic. Remember now, Merrick Garland was on the prosecution team that prosecuted Marion Barry. When we took DC statehood to the Supreme Court and won in some regards, because they ruled it was really a political decision and not something in the judicial branch, something for a House to do. He argued against DC statehood. It's not as if the Obama administration didn't have two African-American attorneys general. So he's kind of a step back. I think people felt like, this was something to give him since he was denied the Supreme Court, polite and thoughtful, but again, unworthy. But Attorney Tarver is right. The public pressure has helped. Ironically, the public pressure around January 6th, I don't know if he signs off on the Breonna Taylor cops prosecution, if he's not taking hits every day from other white, really, James, other white establishment Democrats, okay, like Claire McCaskill and others, and Leon Panetta, saying he should do something. He should get off of his rusty dusty and do some prosecutions. That's very significant. So hopefully that will keep him to the task. As far as Brittney, yeah, that's horrifying. That's a frightening situation for her to be in. Now, we're supposed to believe that the conclusion of her trial, which I don't think anyone thought she would be acquitted because it's Russia, but we're led to believe the conclusion of her trial will now speed up the negotiations to get her free. Biden finally has spoken up about that. The White House has pretty much implored that, those of us who would want to keep some street heat going should not do that. I hope that's not a mistake. Lauren, I think one of the reasons some people are quiet in all communities right now is because the word went out far and wide, shh, don't y'all do nothing, because then that's going to tick off Russia and make it even harder to get her home. I hope that's not a big political miscalculation, because, for a long time, no one was doing anything. Then we had prayer vigils at the embassy and the consulate. And then the White House got we got to do something now, because they saw the public, people were getting very, very restless. Now the guidance is nobody do anything. I was on a call today. Some folk were calling me, some very influential people called, say, hey, man, we need to get back out in the street. And I said, well, they don't really want us to do anything anymore. So I hope that's right, y'all. I'm just letting you know that. God bless our sister, and we love her, and we want her home. Hopefully this will lead to the negotiations that will bring her home.
Well, thanks, of course, and always, Mark, Make It Plain Thompson. You got to check him out. If you're not checking out Make It Plain, then you are losing. We thank you all. Thank you all for joining us this morning, all of our guests. It's been phenomenal, and we will continue to bring you this coverage. Go to blackpressusa.com, and you can see the latest on Brittney Griner and Breonna Taylor. Thanks for joining Let It Be Known. We'll see you next week.